In this video, I'll tell you exactly how to get professional level aim in CS2, starting with how I did it, following up with all the information I know about aiming. But I won't stop there. By the end of the video, I'll tell you the specifics of how to properly use that aim in CS2, because you might have good aim but still be failing. Here's how I got good aim. Let's go back to 2019. I just got my first computer with a graphics card, and the first game I played on it was CSGO, and I was diabolically bad. I remember my friend dropping me an A1S on Mirage because it was the only gun accurate enough for me to be able to hit shots. But from there I spiraled. CS became my obsession, and more importantly, improving at CS became an obsession. And now here I am, years later, and I've reached a pretty high level through training. Now over the years, my training routine has changed many times, but one thing was consistent. And that was that every day, as consistently as I could, I spent 1 hour practicing my mechanics. And I'll go into the specifics of what makes up a good training routine later in the video. But for now, the way that I got good at aiming was that 1 hour a day, as consistently as I could, I practiced my aim. I spent that 1 hour specifically trying to improve my mechanics, fixing the mistakes in my aim and targeting the weaknesses I had with specific training, constantly reviewing my training, and eventually I got good. And this didn't only help me in game, it helped me as a person. Devoting myself towards a discipline, even if it is just a video game, made me go down the path for self-improvement, and it helped me grow as a person. So I cannot say this enough, but practice and discipline can do more for you than you might think. But before you ever think about aim, let's talk about preparation. If you only take one thing away from this video, make it this: stretch your hands every day before you play. If you're watching this, you probably play a lot of video games. Well, to do that, you need your hands. And by not stretching your hands, you're taking that metaphorical step towards the cliff's edge. Why so many people don't do this every day before playing baffles me. Because not only can it prevent wrist and muscle injuries to your hands, it also makes you play better. You all know you should warm up before a play session, right? Shoot some bots, get your aim feeling good. Well, I don't know if you guys know this secret, but what you're doing there is warming up the muscles in your wrist and hand, making sure they're loose and ready to move as you want them to. And a great way of making sure your hand and wrist feel loose and move properly is to stretch them. Okay, just please. Stretch your hands before every time you play. Just look up a routine for gamers and do it. It takes like 2 minutes and there are so many benefits. Now let's move on to the rest of the preparation for having good aim. Starting with your gear. In CS, having decent gear just will make you play better. So I'm going to go through a list of what you need and why. Starting with the computer and monitor. You need a computer that can run CS at 300 FPS, and a monitor with at least 144 Hz, preferably higher. The reason this is so impactful for having good aim is because you will literally have more time to react. This is because a monitor at higher refresh rates, running with a PC that can display frames at a similar rate to the refresh rate, or higher, means that the enemies are just displayed quicker on your screen, and displayed more accurately as it makes adjustments. If that's not something you understand, just trust me. 300 FPS and a 144 Hz monitor or higher, that's what you need. Moving on, you need a decent gaming mouse. Picking a mouse you like is personal, and I'm not going to get into it here, but if you have a mouse from any of the reputable gaming brands, you're probably fine. As long as it's not an office mouse, you shouldn't have a problem. You also need a large mouse pad, because the larger mouse pad means the more space you have to move your mouse, and the lower you can comfortably keep your sense without needing to constantly pick up the mouse. Okay, now that you've got your setup, we can move on to the settings side of the preparation. First things first, turn off mouse acceleration. Then we can move on to your sensitivity. You should have an eDPI of 600 to 1200, with closer to the middle being preferable. And if you're wondering what eDPI is, just very quickly, it's your in-game sense multiplied by your DPI. For example, I play on 1.9 cents and I have 400 DPI, so my eDPI is 760. Anywhere in that range that you find comfortable is recommended. If you have an ultra high sense because of space constraints, then that's fine. But I will urge people with extremely high sensitivities to know that they're putting themselves at a disadvantage, because it is more inconsistent and requires much higher precision. There's a very good reason that 90% of professional players fall in that 600 to 1200 eDPI range. And depending on your sensitivity, you might want to change your grip style. Now there are 3 kinds of mouse grips: palm grip, claw grip, and finger grip. Palm grip uses the palm and fingers rested on the mouse to aim. It's generally better for lower sensitivities, and it's what I personally use. It provides the most consistency as you're only using your fingers for micro adjustments, whilst your wrist and arm do most of the aiming. Claw grip uses the fingers to aim mostly, with the base of the palm and the wrist being used as support. You might find yourself transitioning into it during play, even if you use palm or fingertip grip. For example, my palm grip turns into a claw grip every time I spray in CS. This is because I control the spray with my fingers and then aim with my palm and my wrist. Fingertip grip is where the palm mostly doesn't make contact with the mouse, and the mouse is solely controlled by the fingertips. It's great for the micro adjustments and for high sensitivity players, but it does come with an inherent risk if you're going to be playing on high sensitivity for years with this grip. This is because it doesn't involve using your arm to aim at all, which places the full burden on your wrist. And one last note on preparation is to not change your sense. Building up muscle memory isn't worth as much when you change your sense every time you miss a shot. I'm looking at NA players for this one. Just find a sense and stick with it. You didn't miss because your sense was too low or high. You missed because you suck. Aim fundamentals. Okay, now that we understand how we're holding the mouse, we can move on to the fundamentals of aiming. This stuff might seem simple, but it's important to fully understand it, so that you can accurately analyze what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. I'm going to go over aiming techniques and how they're relevant to CS. I'll also give some details on how people are aiming in CS and how it fundamentally affects the game at a high level. Let's start with flicks. Flicking is a single movement in a direction towards a target. In CS, flicking is more important than in any other game. In Overwatch, you might be tracking more. In TF2, you might be doing more switching or flicking depending on what merc you play. But in CS, you're flicking. The low time to kill and snappy gameplay means that it's the most used technique for CS. 90% of the shots hit in CS are about flicking. Flicking can be split into two categories, micro flicks and macro flicks. And there are two techniques for how to flick depending on how you use these two kinds of flicks. The first technique, and the one that I use personally, is to macro flick as closely and quickly as I can to the target, then micro flick to adjust onto the target for accuracy. This is what I use all the time and make sure that you're accurate and fast. The second technique is to macro flick at a slower speed to allow for the macro flick to travel straight to the target, not requiring a micro flick adjustment. I recommend you practice the first technique because you can specifically practice micro flicks and macro flicks separately for rapid improvement. Next up is switching. Switching is when you're tracking one target, then move the crosshair to track to the next target in quick succession. This is primarily used in spray transfers or rapid burst transfers. It's important to practice those for the big plays to come through. Finally is tracking, where you keep your crosshair on a moving target. This is important for spray control and being able to spray down moving targets. And to speak a bit more about aiming fundamentals before moving on, I want to talk about smooth aim versus shaky aim, and tension management. But let's start with smooth versus shaky aim. Shaky aim is more common in high sense players, but for low sense players, smooth aim is definitely more desirable. And it's not just because it looks good, it's because it feels better to do, and you have a greater control of your crosshair if you can move it smoothly. How do you get smooth aim? Just aim smoothly? Go very slowly. Ensure that you're aiming smoothly. Alright, stay with me. Anyone can move their mouse from A to B with a smooth motion, if they do it slowly enough. There's a famous saying when it comes to this. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Because by repeating it over and over again, doing it smoothly over and over again, you'll eventually become quicker the more you do it, all whilst maintaining smooth motions. Another way to maintain smooth aim is by properly managing your tension. What I mean by this is the literal tension of the muscles in your hand as you hold your mouse. You can think of tension management like a resource bar in a video game, where you spend tension to make difficult mouse movements, at the price of having less control in the future because your hand is too tense to move as you want it to. Trying to keep your hand as relaxed as possible is key in tension management, because if your hand is in an incredibly tense state, it's difficult to move it accurately to where you want it to. As you practice, just focus on keeping your hand relaxed. The more you practice, the less tension you'll have to use, because you'll have a more comfortable movement in your muscle memory. But if you're tense outside of the game, feeling nerves or getting tilted, generally anything that affects your mentality can affect how you tense your hand. Mentality. I'm going to end up having a section about mentality in every video I make at this rate. But aim and mentality are pretty closely connected. Have you ever felt confident in a game of CS? You're probably aiming pretty well at the time. Was it the aim that was making you confident? Or was it the confidence that was making you aim well? It was the confidence making you aim well. Ask any player with a large number of hours, and they'll probably tell you the same thing. But I'm going to answer the nebulous question of what is good mental? I'm no sports psychologist, but from what I've learned, and in managing my own mentality, I would define good mental as three things: confident, focused, resilient. So let's talk about how to attain this. Confidence. If you aren't naturally confident, an easy way to build confidence is through hard work. Putting in 1 hour every day, like I mentioned before, brings a large amount of self-confidence in the server. Focus. To be focused in the server for 30 to 45 minutes straight is really difficult. And I don't mean just paying attention, I mean you're only thinking at all times about the game and how to win. To not dwell on mistakes, to not think about emotions or irrelevant problems, or even to only being 80% focused on your crosshair instead of 100%. All of this is incredibly difficult. So the unattainable goal is to only be thinking about relevant and important things on how to win for the full duration of the game. And unless you're doing that, you don't have a perfect mentality, because almost no one does. To improve your focus, you can just actively practice with focus in mind as a goal. And over time, you'll eventually be able to focus better and for longer. Now, taking care of yourself physically can also help a lot in terms of focus. Make sure you're sleeping 8 hours, eating well, getting enough exercise, and that kind of thing, because it really does make a difference. Which is why you see so many pro players going to the gym and talking about how their physical well-being is affecting their game. Finally, resilience. This means that how well you're playing is not affected by the circumstance you find yourself in. I don't just mean toxicity. For example, if you miss the first 10 bullets of a mag, are you as focused for the 11th bullet, or have you given up? That's what I mean by resilience. At all times, you need to be going for the best outcome, regardless of how bad the situation is. Whether that's within a half-second micro situation or across a whole game. And a pet peeve of mine is to do with whiffing. I've whiffed, you've whiffed, it's gonna happen, so why do people beat themselves up about it? I've seen pro players whiff, plenty of times. And I'm not a pro, I don't get paid to play the game at the highest level, so why should I feel bad about whiffing if even they can do it? The answer is I shouldn't, and neither should you. Just a personal gripe I have with people's perspective on whiffs and mistakes in general. Forgive yourself and understand that it's gonna happen, because consistency is impossible. Unless you have complete control over the environment, you will perform differently every single time you play. So go with the ups and downs of playing CS and just keep focusing on improving. Specifically in terms of using your aim to go with the ups and downs, a piece of advice I think is key that isn't talked about enough is to play to your own level on the day. If you're having a bad day in terms of aim, or even just put against someone who's really sharp, it's better not to go for risky plays, where your aim will be the deciding factor. Play with your brain and not your aim on those days. The opposite is also true. If your aim is better, try and put yourself in more situations where you can showcase that to get the most value out of it. And this isn't binary, it's a spectrum. It's about measuring how difficult aim-wise the play you want to go for is, compared to how well you're aiming that day compared to your opponents. And one last tip on aim fundamentals before we move on. Don't overthink. Aiming is not a conscious process. You're not solving an equation. Conscious thought isn't going to help you. Just let your instincts and your muscle memory take over, and don't overthink it. Counter-Strike aim specifics. Aim trainers differ from Counter-Strike in specific ways that you need to know, because aim isn't everything in CS. And by understanding the way that aim interacts with CS as a game, you can improve your CS specific aim more rapidly. Aim trainers are offline and unaffected by networking. I hit that on my screen doesn't happen in an aim trainer, and you'll never miss due to movement inaccuracy, aim punch, or random bullet spread if you're using an aim trainer. So an important part of aiming well in CS has nothing to do with your right hand point click ability. It can be about how you take the gunfight, how you counter strafe, and the specific situation of the gunfight and how you got yourself into it, rather than how well you can click on them. And understanding the specifics of Counter-Strike as a game and what shooting technique to use is equally important. What I mean by this is knowing when to burst, spray, tap, or how to combine those can give you an advantage over someone with better fundamental aim than you. Also, recoil control is a muscle memory that you have to train separate from aim trainers, probably best done in workshop maps. And a huge part of aiming in CS that isn't as important in other games is crosshair placement. Putting your crosshair in a place where you will have to move it as minimally as possible to shoot the enemy is what crosshair placement is all about. And having good crosshair placement comes down to two things specifically. First up is game sense, which is how you analyze the game as you play it. Because if you can accurately predict where the enemy will be, you can position your crosshair accordingly. Secondly, it's about how you move your crosshair into good crosshair placement locations as you play. This is the way you transition your crosshair in between good crosshair placement locations. There are two ways of doing this, with the second being pretty underused and extremely powerful. The first is called aim smoothing, where you smoothly move your crosshair around an edge. This is comfortable and pretty natural for most people to do, but can have the negative of being inaccurate and never allows you to pre-aim someone. The benefit of aim smoothing is that you can do it more consistently as you move across large distances. The second is called aim chopping, where you chop up an angle, constantly pre-aiming in small increments to ensure you're always peaking with good pre-aim. This is a powerful technique that I don't see used enough, but it takes a lot more focus and precise movements than aim smoothing, but it is a lot more powerful in certain instances. The final point I want to make about aim in CS is that it can be a crutch that prevents improvement. If you blame every lost gunfight on bad aim, you'll miss the fact that you ran out into 3 people through a Molotov, and that your aim was not the problem. And I would go as far as to say that you should almost never blame your aim for a lost gunfight, except in the most extreme examples. Because if you're constantly practicing your aim, it's not something you should be concerned about in your demo analysis. If you're always looking for better ways to have taken gunfights rather than blaming your right hand, you'll improve much faster. Training. The final part is how you train. How should you spend your time improving? I don't know. I'm not you. I don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are. I don't know what kind of aim training you find fun, so I can't really tell you what routine to follow. You have to make your own. But what I can tell you is what specific kinds of training do for you, and how to choose what to do in your own training. But before that, let's talk about warm-ups. You should warm up every time you sit down for a session. I never did a specific warm-up because I just did my large 1-hour training sessions before I played. I found it more efficient that way because after an hour of training, I would be plenty warm. But a good warm-up is key if you aren't training as a warm-up before you sit down for a gaming session. A good warm-up should warm up every aspect of your game, from your flicks, tracking and switching, up to your movement and your focus. So make sure you pick tasks that sufficiently warm up every aspect of your game. The reason deathmatch is so important for warm-up for most players is that the tension of playing against other people can throw you off if you're not used to it. You don't want to spend the first few rounds of a game getting used to it, so do it in DM. Okay, let's get into the thick of what certain kinds of training can do for you. I'm going to generalize for the training types because all of them can be edited in slight ways to change the conditions, such as headshot only, what gun you use in game, or for aim trainers there's even more variability. It goes on and on. So let's keep it general and simple. Let's start with aim trainer tasks. I use Aim Labs because it's free, but the other aim trainers are probably just as good and have similar tasks. Now let's start with grid shots. There are a bunch of kinds of grid shots: precision, speed, small, large, it doesn't matter as long as you find one you like. Grid shots are static shooting galleries where you shoot orbs that spawn. This is great to use for getting that muscle memory down of being able to flick anywhere on your screen. And being able to see the next target as you shoot the first one means you can focus on moving the mouse smoothly from one target to another without having to react. And grid shots can be really satisfying and simple, so I'd recommend this task for anyone. The next type is micro shots. This is a specific task that lets you train your micro flicks, and I can't recommend it enough, because micro flicks are so foundational to your aim. It's important to have a lot of confidence in your micro flicks. The next is motion shot tasks. We have to flick onto a moving target, which is something that you have to do a lot in CS, and this task is really good for improving your pistols. Switch tasks. These have you track multiple orbs. I wouldn't recommend doing this one too much because it isn't extremely relevant to CS, but don't neglect switching altogether. While I might do like 8 or 9 different grid tasks to improve my flicking, I'd only do 1 or 2 switch tasks. Tracking tasks. Do at least one of these because it really helps you improve your smooth movement of your crosshair across the screen as you play, as well as being able to improve your spraying and comfort in aim in general. If you aren't being careful, a CS player can have this as a large weakness, so do at least one tracking task during your training. Now moving on to the in-game stuff, starting with static bots. Getting a feel for the models and just shooting static bots has a lot more value than you might think. It's great for warming up because of how easy it is, and it can be a valuable part of training because it gets you really in tune with headshotting bots, and it does make you play better. Getting that connection between movement of your left hand and the aim in your right hand as you move around and shoot static bots is really valuable. And static bots are great for learning weapons on. Getting a good feel of a Galil or an SMG you don't use as often, even some of the pistols. Now this is a great place to do it, because you're not going to get as much experience with them in DM servers or during your ranked games. Moving bots is a great step up from static bots that does all of the same things, but is slightly tougher. Not a necessary part of the routine, but is definitely valuable if you have trouble with moving targets. More experienced players probably go straight to deathmatch. Speaking of deathmatch, it's probably the most important thing you can do to improve your CS mechanics. And I don't mean Valve deathmatch, I mean a community deathmatch server where you respawn instantly and probably get shot in the back of the head without being able to do anything. The intensity of these DM servers is what makes them valuable. That, and the volume of gunfights you can take, is unparalleled. Meaning you can learn the muscle memory of how to take fights much more quickly than if you were just playing the ranked mode on your own. I cannot stress enough that learning how every possible fight can be taken and how the models move is such a valuable thing that can only really be learned from playing a lot of deathmatch. So add a certain number of deathmatch kills to your routine. So now that I've given some of the tasks you can do, pick enough that it adds up to an hour, and good luck in your aim training. A final tip is to find the fun. Make a routine that you personally will enjoy. For me, I don't mind doing boring routines because I just put on a podcast. Maybe for you, that's music or talking with a friend. Just find a method to make it enjoyable, or you won't last long doing it. I just want to say thanks to everyone who watched this or my last video. It was really fulfilling seeing so many people enjoy it. Not to mention the comments, you're all super encouraging. Let me know in the comments which topics you want to hear about, and I'll see you in the next one.